Globalists, those who see a unified, borderless world controlled by a few conglomerates and entities, of course, love this. To them, this is a world where they can exert maximum control with minimal effort, a world where resistance becomes not just futile, but almost impossible. And that's terrifying. Europe, being at the forefront of so many of these technologies and policies, is a critical battleground. We are at a juncture where decisions made today will define the trajectory of entire nations for generations to come. We need a broader public discourse. We need to really dissect what's at stake. Are we willing to trade our freedoms for a bit of convenience? Are we ready to hand over our agency to algorithms? It's time for not just politicians, but for citizens, technologists, philosophers, and every stakeholder to come to the table. Because if we don't act now, by the time we realize the repercussions, it might be too late. This isn't about resisting progress. It's about ensuring that progress doesn't come at the cost of our very essence as human beings. From ours, and yet we seem to be heading down a similar path. The surveillance state, the social credit system that China employs, is something that many said would never happen in Europe, but look at the steps being taken now. It's more subtle, packaged differently, wrapped in terms of convenience, security, and progress. Every new technology, every app, every update is sold to us as an upgrade to our lives. Yet with each step, we sacrifice a bit more of our privacy. The cameras on the streets, the data harvested from our online activities, the push for cashless societies, they all point towards an interconnected web where every action is monitored and potentially judged. The Ukraine situation is definitely a cause for concern, but it also serves as a distraction. As Europe fixates on external threats, we are ignoring the internal transformation, a transformation that's slowly altering the fabric of our society. It's ironic, in our bid to keep up with technology and to progress, we are inadvertently building walls around ourselves, the kind of walls that are invisible yet confining. The digital prison you mentioned is not some dystopian future. It's a reality that's forming right before our eyes. The difference between China and Europe is that China is upfront about its intentions. In Europe, it's veiled under layers of corporate interests, technological advancements, and government policies. And by the time many realize it, they're too entwined in the system to break free. We need to have a conversation about the kind of future we want. Do we want a world where every step is tracked, every transaction monitored, where algorithms decide our worth? Or do we want a world where technology serves humanity rather than controls it? The decisions we make now will define the path Europe takes in the coming decades. And I fear if we remain passive, we might lose the essence of what makes Europe truly unique and free. Anyway, in the West, we have traditionally prided ourselves on individualism, personal freedoms, and the right to privacy. The very ethos of Europe, and to an extent the Americas, is built on these principles. China's society has always been about the collective, about harmony and the greater good of the community. This stems from their ancient philosophies and traditions. For them, if implementing a certain system means stability and order, even if it curtails certain freedoms, many would support it because it fits within their societal framework. It's important not to look at one system as being inherently better or worse than the other. What's critical is the cultural context and what people value. It's easy to point fingers and say, look at their surveillance state, but we have to understand it in its cultural and historical context. However, that's China, Korea, Japan. In Europe and the West, we value our personal freedoms and rights to privacy. That's deep-rooted in our history, from the Magna Carta to the French Revolution to the American Bill of Rights. It's embedded in our societal fabric. Now, when we see attempts to implement systems that closely monitor citizens or curtail freedoms in the name of security or progress, it feels alien. It feels wrong, not because it's inherently evil, but because it's contrary to what we've been brought up to believe and value. The danger is when we start adopting these systems without the necessary debates, checks, and balances, when we accept them without question, believing it's for our safety or for the greater good, without realizing that we might be undermining the very foundation of our society. And once those rights are eroded, regaining them becomes a monumental task. Indeed, history reminds us that any society's core values are deeply rooted in its past. Our ancestors, for whom freedom and the right to self-determination were so important, would undoubtedly be distressed by the creeping influence of global surveillance and control. You bring to light a fascinating dynamic. In many parts of the world, particularly in the West, there's a deep-seated belief in the rights of the individual. This ethos is not just about privacy. It's about ensuring that citizens have say in how they're governed, the rights to free expression, and yes, in some countries, the right to bear arms. In the U.S., the Second Amendment ensures that the population has the right to protect itself. It stems from a long history of distrust towards overbearing governments. It's not just about self-defense, but defense against tyranny. Many Americans view their right to bear arms as the last line of defense against a government that might overstep its bounds. In contrast, many European countries, with their tighter gun control laws, don't have this as an explicit safeguard. The focus has historically been more on collective security and societal well-being. This isn't to say that one approach is better than the other. They're just different paths stemming from different historical and cultural backgrounds. The challenge now is ensuring that our freedoms, both collective and individual, are protected. With the rapid rise of technology and its potential for misuse, the balance between security and liberty becomes even more precarious. As we've seen in other parts of the world, it's far too easy for well-intentioned security measures to evolve into tools of oppression. The question we need to grapple with is how we can use these technologies to improve our lives without compromising the freedoms we hold dear. It requires vigilance, engagement, and a clear-eyed understanding of our past and the principles we want to uphold in our future. Understanding the essence of being armed transcends merely having a weapon. In the U.S., it's seen as a symbol of protection, not only against immediate threats, but also as a safeguard against potential governmental overreach. It's a reflection of a historical mistrust of unchecked power. But in Europe, the dynamic seems a bit different. There seems to be a form of complacency or perhaps even resignation setting in among many. The digital age, with all its conveniences, has also brought along concerns about privacy, autonomy, and personal freedom. The idea of digital passports, while ostensibly for health and security reasons, could very well be a stepping stone to a more surveilled and controlled society. It's concerning when people start feeling indifferent about these shifts. It's a sign that they either don't see the potential dangers or feel powerless to do anything about it. The younger generations, having grown up in a largely digital world, might not fully grasp the implications of surrendering their freedoms little by little in the name of convenience or security. The spirit of resistance and the will to fight against perceived oppression isn't completely gone, though. As you mentioned, there have been pockets of resistance, like the farmers. However, it's essential not to romanticize or oversimplify these movements. Every group, every individual has a myriad of motivations and beliefs, but at its core, these movements reflect a deep-seated unease about the direction in which things are moving. What Europe, and indeed the world, needs now is a renewed commitment to education, discourse, and understanding. The populace must be made aware of the subtle shifts in power dynamics, the potential pitfalls of unchecked digitalization, and the importance of preserving fundamental freedoms. And it's not just about resistance. It's about proactive engagement, seeking out solutions that ensure both security and liberty in this rapidly changing world. Indeed, there's a lot of frustration surrounding the very act of trying to effect change, as people often rally around a cause like the farmer protests, hoping it would bring about significant change. But then when it comes to the actual moment of decision making, in this case, the November elections, it seems like choices are limited. The party they believe would champion their cause seems to align with the broader agendas, like the 2030 Agenda and the World Economic Forum. This pattern isn't new, and it's not limited to one particular region or country. Often parties and movements that present themselves as alternatives end up aligning with more established power structures once they get a taste of power or face the realities of governance. And that leaves the average citizen feeling betrayed and despondent. Your observation about the lack of informed decision-making is spot on. In this age of information overload, ironically, it's challenging to get accurate and unbiased information. The mainstream media, often accused of having its own biases, further muddles the water. Hence, many don't put in the effort to dig deeper, relying instead on snippets, headlines, or at times misleading narratives. Your metaphor of pissing into the wind perfectly encapsulates this sentiment. It feels like a lone battle, where efforts to educate and inform seem to dissipate without making a significant impact. But it's essential not to lose hope. Throughout history, many significant changes have come about due to persistent efforts by dedicated individuals or groups. It may seem like an uphill task, and it undoubtedly is, but every drop of effort counts. Continuing to inform, educate, and engage is crucial. Even if it feels like you're only reaching a few, remember that informed citizens can act as catalysts for broader societal change. As more and more people become aware and demand accountability and transparency, there's hope that the status quo can shift, but it will undoubtedly take time, perseverance, and resilience.